The first time I noticed the door behind the altar, it was barely a glimpse, just a chipped edge peeking out from behind the heavy velvet curtain. I had been volunteering at St. Gideon's Church for a few weeks, helping Father Elias with evening cleanup after Mass. The old building creaked like it had lungs, and the stale incense always clung to your clothes, but I liked the solitude. I'd started going to the church after work, mostly to get away from home. My apartment was a box with peeling paint and neighbors who screamed more than they talked. The church felt safer, calmer, and Father Elias, a soft-spoken man in his 70s, welcomed the company. That door nagged at me. St. Gideon's wasn't a big place. I'd been in every room. The storage closet full of dusty hymnals, the confessional booth, the sacristy. But that door, in behind a curtain most people never touched, it wasn't mentioned. I never saw Father Elias go near it. One Wednesday night, after we finished putting away the altar candles, I asked him about it. He paused, claw still in his hand, then turned slowly. There's nothing back there but old junk, sealed off years ago. Then he smiled, too fast, and walked away. That night, I didn't sleep well. Something about his tone. It wasn't fear. It was control, like he knew I'd ask eventually and had rehearsed that answer. 2 nights later, he called in sick and asked me to lock up alone. The church was nearly empty, just me and the thick silence. I walked past the altar, slow, deliberate, the curtain now more inviting than ever. My fingers brushed the fabric. The door was older than the rest of the building, different wood, painted over several times. It had a steel padlock. I shouldn't have done it, but I came back the next day with bolt cutters. Inside, the room was suffocating. Stale air hit me like mold, and Rod had been having a conversation for decades. No light switch. I used my phone flashlight. There was a desk, a single cot, rusted filing cabinets. On the wall, pinned newspaper clippings. That's when the panic started. Local woman still missing after 5 days. Teen vanishes after attending St. Gideon's Vigil. Priest suicide leaves more questions than answers. Dozens of them. Different years. All tied to this church. I felt cold in my spine. Not from the temperature, but like something inside me knew I had crossed a line. Then I found the trapdoor. It was under the cot, small and crudely built. I hesitated, every part of me screaming not to, but I opened it. Just a hole, maybe 6 feet deep. The floor had scratches, deep ones, like someone had tried to climb out with their fingernails. There was something metallic at the bottom. I reached with my phone camera and snapped a picture. I wish I hadn't. It was a bracelet, one I'd seen before, on a missing persons poster taped to a bus stop weeks ago. A young girl, gone without a trace. People had assumed she ran away. I backed out of the room, my pulse deafening. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't go to work. I didn't go back to the church. Instead, I went to the police. And here's where the twist hits. They didn't believe me. Not right away. Because Father Elias had been reported dead 2 years ago. The man I'd been working with, cleaning the church with, laughing with, was not Father Elias. His real name was Peter Godwin, a janitor at the church decades ago. Fired for misconduct, quietly dismissed, no charges filed. He'd taken over the building after Father Elias died unexpectedly, probably by Peter's own hand. St. Gideon's never had many visitors. The diocese left it alone, marked it for closure, but never followed through. And Peter? He used that. The man had been living in that church, pretending to be a priest, keeping victims in that room, maybe just scaring them, maybe worse. I never found out how many. The police found more evidence, hair, personal items, and in a buried trunk under the church garden, bone fragments. No ghosts, no demons, just a man. A quiet, gentle-seeming man who offered me tea and asked about my job and told me I had a good heart. I still volunteer sometimes, but never at churches. And I've learned something important. The scariest things aren't hiding in the dark. They're standing right next to you, holding a broom and smiling. It started with a bell, a deep, rusted clang that echoed through the fog, cutting across the morning stillness like a blade. I remember stopping in my tracks, my camera bag slung over my shoulder, and glancing toward the old church tower of St. Miriam's. It was 6:17 a.m., and the bell hadn't rung in years. I know because I grew up in that town. Everyone knew St. Miriam's had been decommissioned in 2003, sealed off after the roof nearly caved in. They said it was dangerous, unstable. But there was something else, something they never said outright. They avoided talking about that place, like the air around it was cursed. I was back in town after 14 years, visiting my mother's grave. She died last winter, dementia finally claiming what was left of her mind. She used to tell stories about St. Miriam's, stories that never made sense. Whispers of footsteps behind her, voices during Mass that didn't come from the congregation. I chalked it up to her illness. Until that morning. The fog was thick, curling around the gravestones like something alive. I found myself walking toward the church before I realized I'd even made the decision. The path was overgrown, gravel crunching under my boots. A crow flapped out of the bell tower with a ragged scream as I approached, and for a second, I almost turned back. But curiosity has a way of silencing fear. The heavy oak doors were still chained, rust biting into the links, but one of the side entrances, an old fire escape, was partially open, as if someone had forced it recently. I pushed it, and it groaned, the sound oddly human. Inside, it smelled of mold and whetstone. The pews were still there, though many were broken or toppled. Dust hung in the beams of pale morning light, seeping through the stained glass. The altar stood intact, but its white cloth was yellowed, the cross behind it draped with a tattered black cloth. I started taking photos, the camera clicking softly. Every now and then, I thought I heard a shuffle behind me, or the creak of old wood settling. Normal sounds, I told myself, just age and rot. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then I found the door to the back room ajar. I stepped in. It was the old sacristy. Robes still hung on a bent rod, stiff with age. There were candles, fresh ones, surprisingly, and a matchbook lying beside them. That's when my skin went cold. Someone had been here. Recently. I backed out of the room, but the church suddenly felt different, heavier, like something had shifted. Then came the whisper. It was faint, barely audible. A breath more than a word. Stay. I froze. Held my breath. There was nothing. I moved faster then, heading for the exit. As I crossed the nave, I noticed something strange. The bell rope, hanging in the center aisle. It wasn't there before. It was frayed, soaked in something dark. I swear it hadn't been there when I walked in. The whisper came again, clearer now. You came back. I didn't wait to hear more. I burst through the side door and ran into the fog, not stopping until I was back on the main road, chest heaving, sweat cold against my skin. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went to the local library, looking for anything about St. Miriam's. That's when I found the police report, dated March 12th, 2003. My mother had been questioned after an incident during a night service. According to the file, she'd seen the priest, Father Bellamy, doing something in the back room, something with candles and blood. She claimed he was binding spirits, said he was trying to keep something inside the church, not bless it. 3 weeks later, he disappeared. They said he left town, but the report hinted at something darker. Paragraphs redacted, witnesses recanting, and one photo, a bell rope soaked red, lying across the altar like a severed limb. I remember my mother's confusion, the way she'd scream when she heard bells, even on the television. I used to think it was just dementia. Now, I'm not so sure. I went back. I had to. I brought Saul the flashlight, a hammer, anything I could use if it got bad. The air around St. Miriam's was colder than the rest of town, even in the daylight. Inside, the church looked the same, but the bell rope was gone. The sacristy was sealed shut now, nailed from the inside. And then I heard it. Footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate, coming from the bell tower. I climbed, each step groaned under my weight. Dust thickened. Something metallic clinked above. As I reached the top, the air turned sour, like burnt hair and rot. Then I saw it. A figure in priest's robes, swaying from the bell rope. His eyes were open. Not dead, just staring. He opened his mouth and whispered, "I never left." I stumbled back, nearly falling. But when I looked again, he was gone. No body, no rope, just a cracked bell and an old Bible lying open. I still remember how I was struggling to either pick the Bible up or save my life. I left town that night and never returned.